All right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. All right, so we're going to start off with some announcements, followed by the recommended reading, our affirmation of the day. Then we'll do introductions and victories. That's an opportunity for anybody who's new to introduce themselves or to share any victories or celebrations from the past week. Then we're going to start our review. Tonight we're reviewing chapters 1 through 3. We're going to do part 1 of the review, take a break, come back, do part 2, and then have some Q&A and wrap it up by 9 o'clock. A reminder that tonight's workshop is being recorded and will be available on the BeBiggerToday.com website and YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. Please feel free to stop your video and mute your microphone if you do not wish to be seen or heard on the recording. Be bigger than you think you are. The second edition is here. 35% new and revised content, including 30 plus pages of new material. It's on sale now for only $21.95 on my website. The first 100 copies from me will be numbered and certified. And I know some of you have also supported me on Amazon, which is great. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So you have two options. You can either get it from me or directly from Amazon. And while you're on my website, check out my New York City photo book, New York Cityscapes, at BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore, collaboration between myself and 6 other New York City area photographers. We each have our own unique take on the New York City skyline and the landmarks that make the Big Apple what it is. So check it out. It's still on sale for $16.95, BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. Still have merch too, hats and t-shirts. Save 20% by using the discount code MERCH20 at checkout at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And my original art and photography. These are my original landscape, cityscape, abstract images. These are professionally framed gallery wrap canvas prints. And they're available again on the website at BeBiggerToday.com/art-photography. And here's your commercial for tonight.
Peter's photos and abstract designs are uniquely beautiful, one-of-a-kind works of art. These gallery wrap canvas prints are set in a contemporary shadow box floating frame and will enhance the beauty of any home or office. Available in 4 different sizes, each piece is professionally framed and comes complete and ready to hang. Frames are available in your choice of black, white, or brown, and each is signed by the artist. Peter's original art and photography will make a great gift for a client, for yourself, or someone you love. Order yours today.
And moving right along, my NYC refrigerator magnets, 11 in all. These are my original photos on New York City souvenirs, refrigerator magnets. Check them out at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And I'm available for one-on-one coaching and or corporate consulting. So if you're a creative person, perhaps a writer, a photographer, an artist, or if you have a company or work for a company and would like me to speak to your management team, your sales team, on how they can be bigger than they think they are, reach out to me through the website at BeBiggerToday.com. And finally, in terms of donations, instead of making cash contributions to the workshop, I would urge you to either purchase a book from me or from Amazon and support the workshop that way. I'll talk more about that if people have questions later. All right, so let's jump right in, guys. Our recommended readings for tonight. So I've kind of saved the best for last. You may or may not be familiar with these books. The author is Ken Carey, and his books are The Starseed Transmissions, The Return of the Birds Tribes, The Third Millennium, and Vision. Now, these books were all published back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Ken Carey is an interesting guy. I'm going to talk about him more in a minute. But the first 3 books, The Starseed Transmissions, The Return of the Bird Tribes, and The Third Millennium, make up the trilogy, the Starseed trilogy. And they present a pretty compelling vision of a spiritual transformation here on Earth, kind of moving from the material, egoic mind to a more spiritual, metaphysical society, civilization. It's just a beautiful vision, and the book Vision actually is his vision of what that future civilization society would look like. But all these books are very compelling. I come back to them from time to time. They are available in paperback. They're available as ebooks. And I did find a few audiobooks, kind of bootlegged audiobooks on YouTube. There doesn't seem to be any official audiobooks for these books. And you guys know that I prefer audiobooks at this point. So I did find a few, like people actually reading into the camera. They're available, but I've actually edited one of them, The Return of the Bird Tribe, so it's a little more listenable. So if you're interested, reach out to me. I'm happy to send you a copy of that. But I really, really recommend these books. If you have any inclination about spirituality or, the evolution of our species, some of us, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but some of us have been looking at the current situation, the current world situation with the virus and all the craziness that's going on as kind of reaching a tipping point. And we will soon have to make some new choices if we want to continue on in any level of harmony or peace as a species. So these books speak to that a little bit, and actually much greater ideas as well. The interesting thing about Return of the Bird Tribes is it's given kind of a historical account of the Native American civilizations that were here, maybe 5,000 years ago in North America, Central America, and even down into South America. And, there's a lot in the Aztec culture and the Native American culture. There's a lot of discussion about spiritual spirits and, the relationship between nature and mankind and all of that. And these books kind of corroborate that, but from the other side, from the side of the spiritual entities that were assisting those tribes, that were assisting those civilizations. So really interesting stuff. Ken Carey is kind of an interesting guy. After quitting his job as a postal worker, Carey moved his family to a farm in rural Missouri where they lived without electricity, plumbing, or any kind of access to the rest of the world. So they had no newspapers, no radio, no television. And they lived that way for about 7 years, living off the land, definitely off the grid. And remember, this was in the late 1960s, early 1970s. During the winter of 1978, Carey was sick, lying in bed with a fever and a severe cold. And he felt a presence and heard a voice speaking to him. And he channeled that voice for 11 days. The entity spoke to him of the coming spiritual transformation of mankind. That transformation will be quite profound, and it presents an optimistic vision of man returning to his spiritual self. But the voice also said our progress would be punctuated by periods of uncomfortable change that will accompany the breaking down of the ego. Now, we talked a lot about the ego in chapter 6, and throughout the workshops, I talk a lot about it in my book. The ego works on an individual level, but it also works on a societal level. It works on the level of nations and of civilizations. So during this breaking down of the human ego, fear and strife in many people will result, and there'll be conflict. There'll be chaos in some parts of the world and some parts of civilization. Eventually, humanity will break through and return to a conscious awareness of God. We will then embark on a miraculous evolution into our greater spiritual selves. Now, guys, honestly, if somebody told me this even a few years ago, I'd be like, okay, what are you smoking or whatever? But, my views have evolved. My spiritual connection has evolved. That will be the subject of my next book. But the more I come back to this material, the more inspired I am. And the more it corroborates with other material that I've been studying for quite a while. from different people, different books, different arenas, and all of that. It all seems to be having a very similar message. So if you have any interest at all, I urge you to, again, check out any of these books, and in particular, the Starseed Transmissions, Return of the Bird Tribes, and the Third Millennium. And you get a used paperback of these for like $3 online. So check it out. All right, our affirmations of the day. So you guys who have downloaded the affirmations meditation #1 from my website, you may be familiar with these. These are also included in the second edition of the book with the sample affirmations. I love my life. I choose happiness. And I welcome miracles in my life. Now, as we review chapter 3 tonight, we're going to talk about happiness. We're going to talk more about happiness. And I'm going to remind you guys that it's my position that happiness is a choice. It's a decision. It's not a feeling. It's not something that just happens when the stars align. We actually have to deliberately and consciously choose happiness. So we're going to talk about what that means tonight during the review. And loving my life. I love my life. That's another choice. I say love is a decision. Love is a choice that we need to make. And it's very easy for me to focus on what's not working in my life. It's very easy for me to get into that negative place. But remember, negative thoughts lead to negative feelings. Negative feelings lead to negative words and actions. And negative words and actions lead to negative outcomes. So we use these affirmations to change our state, to alter our mode of thinking and feeling so that we move from that place of perhaps a negative state to a more positive state. I love my life. I choose happiness. I welcome miracles in my life. Woohoo! All right, so this is the portion of the meeting where we do introductions and victories. If you're new here and would like to introduce yourself, or if you have a victory or celebration that you'd like to share from the last week, this is your opportunity to do that. So just unmute yourself and say hello.
Hey, Peter. Hey, everybody. I'm going to be first.
Go ahead, Dee Dee.
So this is my imagination, because I've invited some of you to Trinity Hot Springs, and I really want to be there. It's in Idaho. It's in Paradise, Idaho. I want to be at Trinity Hot Springs with all of you people. So this is what I'm going to look like. I'm going to put my vision board back up. But I just want to take a second and say thank you, Peter. I listen to those affirmations on my way home from work every morning, crossing the bridge over Lake Washington, and on my way to work as well. And this work and connecting with you and doing, being in it to win it, kind of submerging myself in the whole, program has really meant so much to me over the course of this year, with all the challenges that all the opportunities that I've had. And so I'll keep coming back, and I can't wait to, do this week and next week as a review, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're just wishing you all the success and luck in the world. And I'm so thrilled to be in the room with all of the people here tonight. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I have a surprise for you. I'm going to need 2 more weeks to finish the review. So hopefully you guys are available next week and the week after, because I'll talk about it later, but it was just too much to cram into 2 weeks. I'll talk more about that.
It makes perfect sense to me. Absolutely. We maximum return on investment. I take it, and I'll be contacting you for that audio book you modified. Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, good. Who else wants to say hi?
Hey, Peter. Here's Dr. Jenna Hobbins from Davenport, Iowa.
Dr. Jenna, how are you?
I'm here, and my good friend Dee Dee has encouraged me to join tonight for the, grand finale. I started last year, and the year just got even more rocking and rolling. So, we talked about a hurricane and power outages and hail and all kind of stuff, but it's been quite a year. So I'm happy to be here, and I love your work, Peter. I love your dedication, and it's everything that I've studied and worked with for many years. So it's nice to hear it from other people, and an encouragement to apply that in my daily life. I love my life song. It brings me great joy. And so I hope to be able to continue to utilize your this work and your coming yet to be created.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jenna. Good to see you. Who else wants to say hi or share a victory? Barb?
Yeah, here I am. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
So I'm laughing. I got a new couch, and I realized my other couch, I was sitting on the couch and I was practically on the floor. So right now, as you can see me, I'm sitting on my new couch and I'm way up high. I just think that's very funny. But hi, how are you? And
Great.
it's nice to be here. Really looking forward to these workshops. Victory, same old, but good. Nothing shattering or really to talk about. But I was on my own all last week. With me and my job, and nothing. I was able to handle the whole thing. There was nobody else but me, and everything went fine. So I still struggle with what happened with me. I know you know that. And, I remember what you said. I know it's hard. It's hard when somebody really says that there's something wrong with you in the work environment. And it's not true. It's the other person, or, I don't mean it that way. I mean it that, yes, I had a part of that. And I'm working through it. I'm doing what I have to do, and there were no catastrophes, no problems. So, I guess I actually said to myself, I guess I needed that in order to get here. Is that what you say? Yeah. So that's a perfect example. I was really quite upset, quite hurt, quite out of, and now I'm here, and I hope that I don't allow myself to get hurt like that again. I don't need to experience it to find out if I won't or not. But I would think that maybe I needed to go through that in order to be here. And your book, or these workshops really helped me.
So yeah, so that's been my experience too. Sometimes it's those really kind of difficult, unpleasant experiences that move us to the next level.
Yes.
So I have a strange feeling that you will not react the same way. I know right now maybe you're still a little uncertain. We got to remember it's like we're the toddler learning to walk. So we're a little unsteady with this stuff, because this is a new way of being. It's a new way of interacting with other people. It's a new way of looking at ourselves, feeling, the way we feel about ourselves. So it's a little unfamiliar and all that, but I have a feeling that if it comes up again, and honestly, obviously I can't predict the future, but I have a strange feeling you're not going to have to go through that again, not at that level. And if anything comes up, you'll be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Because now you'll be aware, you'll remember, and you have tools now that you can use to work through that.
Right. And the biggest one is, I think you stress it probably, I don't know if it's every single time we talk or whatever, but that whole thing that you cannot make me feel a certain way. And so I think with, having that inside of me, really embracing it. Yes, 100% believing it. No, I won't go through that, because nobody's going to make me feel, and I think it'll probably blurt out. If it ever did happen again, I'll probably say, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. So what do you think? And I let them figure it out. Okay.
Well, again, and I think that's great. That's perfect. And remember, sometimes we're getting feedback that can actually help us.
Okay.
So if
after I said it out, yeah. After I said it, I realized it. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, if I'm hired to do a job and I'm not performing the job the way it's supposed to be performed or whatever, that could be helpful feedback.
Yes.
But I don't have to take it personally. I don't have to feel bad about myself. I don't have to cop a resentment. I don't have to become a victim. I don't got to do any of that stuff. This is what we talked about with boundaries. So boundaries are permeable, and we can have a mental, verbal, emotional boundary where we let information in that's helpful, but we keep out all that other stuff that's meant to hurt us. So we let the helpful information in, but we don't take on somebody else's, insanity, somebody else's emotional problem, somebody else's, bullying attitude or whatever.
Right.
Now, again, if it's being inappropriate, if they're acting inappropriately, especially if other people are around or something like that, it's okay to do whatever we need to do in that moment to stop that and say, whatever is appropriate to say, like, I would appreciate if we talk about this later, or something to cut that off. And hell, if it gets really bad, you can get up and leave. You're an adult. I'm an adult.
Yeah. No, I feel that way.
Yeah, and if there's helpful information in there or whatever, we can let that in and ultimately be a better employee.
Yes, correct. 100%. Okay, so that's where I'm at. Same old, or I'm doing fine.
It's pretty good. I think it's great.
It is good.
Really? I mean, if you think about where you might have been in the past.
Oh, definitely. I think that's what we all talk about. And we don't want to think about that. The past it's not coming back.
Good.
But, it's not coming back. But like you say, every once in a while you remember, or you can even say to yourself, what were you saying before? It seeks in a little bit, but then you can just push it away. It doesn't really, it's not going to affect me.
Barb, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, that's big.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, good. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So as I said, we're only going to do chapters 1 through 3 tonight. I started on this earlier today, guys, and it was just I have 14 pages of slides to go through tonight, and that was just the first 3 chapters. So I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to do all 4 chapters. That was the original plan. So we'll do 1 through 3 tonight. Next week, we'll do 4 and 5. And then the week after that, we'll do 6 and 7. And then we'll be done, officially done for this round. All right. So we're reviewing chapters 1 through 3. Again, we're working off the 2nd edition now. So the pages are a little different and all that. But let's just jump right in here. So chapter 1, you may remember that the title of chapter 1 is Who Do You Think You Are? And it's my position that this is the most important question we can ask ourselves. Who do you think you are? Who do I think I am? Another way of saying that is, how do I see myself? And this is especially true in every situation that challenges us. So if we have, like what Barb was just describing, if we have a challenging work situation, the situation is never the problem. The problem is always and only how I see myself in that situation. So whenever we're challenged, whenever we feel those negative feelings come up, the anxiety, the fear, the defensiveness, it's a great opportunity in that moment to stop, take a moment, and just say, wow, how do I see myself right now? Who do I think I am in relation to this person, in relation to this situation? Now, my suggestion, I've said this many times, is if you know that you're going to have a difficult situation coming up in the week, during the day, whenever, I think it's prudent to do a little advance intention. So it could just be as simple as taking out a sheet of paper and writing 1 or 2 paragraphs. Let's say you're going to meet with a client, and you know from your past history with this client that sometimes they're a difficult personality. Take 20 minutes, earlier in the week or whenever, and just write out, okay, Who do I think I am? How do I want to see myself in that situation? How do I want to feel? What thoughts do I want to think? What feelings do I want to have? What words and actions do I want to speak? And what outcomes do I want to experience as a result? And write it out. And then come back to it the next day and look at it again, make any changes. And what we're doing is we're setting an advanced intention. And that advanced intention is, this is who I want to be in this situation. I know from my past experiences that when I interact with this person, I feel like a little kid. I feel like I can't take care of myself. I feel like they always manipulate me. I feel like they bully me, or they bulldoze me into a position that I don't want to be in. So you know that about yourself. So what are we going to do? We're going to take responsibility for our experience by setting out an advanced intention. And it's really helpful to do that on paper when you can. Now, why is this question of who do you think you are, how do you see yourself so important? Well, because it's impossible to act in a way that's inconsistent with our internal self-image. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to change habits, trying to change behaviors, trying to change other people, trying to change situations and circumstances. But what few people realize is that what determines our experience in every situation is our internal self-image, how we see ourselves, who we think we are. Very simple example, if I'm confronted with a difficult client or something, or personality, if I think I can handle that situation, I'm going to have a very different experience than if I go into that situation saying, oh my God, I hate meeting with this guy. You know, he's always doing this or that. And I go in with this sense of powerlessness, helplessness. It's going to be a problem. Whatever my expectations are going in, whether of myself or the other person, the tendency is for those expectations to manifest as my experience. So we want to change that. We want to have a different idea. We want to see ourselves differently. And as I say here in number 3, it's often much easier to change who we think we are than it is to change the situation itself. Now, we're going to talk about why that's true in a moment. But just think about your attempts, for instance, to change another person, family member, coworker, neighbor. How does that go? I mean, how often are you really successful at changing them so you can feel better in that situation? I think it's much better to change who we think we are, how we see ourselves, to cultivate, consciously and deliberately cultivate a positive self-image, a positive idea about ourselves, who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve from the situation, and to choose that consciously and deliberately in advance of that situation. And that will carry us through to a different, in my experience, and I've seen it in other people, that will carry us through to a different result, a different outcome. Now, it may not be as much fun as it used to be, because if you're like me, I used to like to blame everybody else for when things didn't work out. So I wouldn't do any advanced preparation. I would go in there feeling like a victim. And then when things didn't work out, I would blame them and tell everybody else what jerks they are. And, you know, the ego really enjoys that. It's part of our egoic identity that we're victims, that we're helpless, that we're powerless. And we take things personally, and we're entitled to attack and seek retaliation and revenge. When I start taking responsibility for my life, all of that goes away. And, you know, at least to begin with, it's not, you know, it's not as much fun. I'm saying that sarcastically, but there's less drama. So it's a whole different experience. All right, stress. So a lot of people talk about stress. Stress is what happens when we focus on things we have no control over. It's the result of seeing ourselves as powerless. When I focus on things I have no control over, it creates fear, it creates anxiety, it creates tension, because I have no control over that. By definition, if I don't have control over something, then I don't know what's going to happen. And it could be, I guess it could be positive, but a lot of times my experience says, well, no, it's not going to be positive. It's going to be negative. And if there's a particular person that I've dealt with in the past that I've had difficult time with, whatever the situation is. So when I focus on things I have no control over, I feel stress. So what do we want to do? We want to focus on the things we can control. Now we're going to see in a moment there's only 4 things in life that we have control over. We'll talk about those in a minute. But to wrap up this slide on number 5, as I said earlier, I really want you guys just to think of this. Any and every time you feel challenged, afraid, any negative emotion at all, remember this. The situation is never the problem. The problem is always and only how we see ourselves in that situation. Now, that's really good news because we often can't change the external circumstances, the external conditions, and certainly the other people that are involved. If we can't change those things, we have no control over them. And if I focus on things I don't have any control over, I'm going to feel stress. So number 6, how we react to something is always determined by how we see ourselves rather than by the thing itself. Now we're going to talk again, and we'll talk more about why that's so in a minute as well. But to give you a little preview, I've said this many times. I've read this in Course in Miracles, many places. We give everything all the meaning that it has for us. We assign a meaning to every event and circumstance in our lives. We assign a particular meaning to that. And we react to that meaning. We're not actually reacting to what's going on out there. Now, the meaning that we give a situation is our subjective interpretation. And I suggest that that subjective interpretation is built on our internal self-image, who we think we are, how we see ourselves in that situation. So if I have an issue with authority figures, when I get pulled over by the police, I automatically am going to default to a place of defensiveness, of powerlessness, whatever it is. That's based on how I see myself in that situation. If I change how I see myself in relation to authority figures, could be a boss, could be a parent, the government, whatever it is, when I begin to notice that and I begin to consciously and deliberately shift my self-image, shift my interpretation, my subjective interpretation based on who I think I am, I have a whole different experience. I got stopped by the police. Actually, I haven't gotten stopped in years, but the last time I did, I was very calm. I had a conversation with the guy. It turned out he just gave me a warning because I rolled through a stop sign, and it was no big deal. But in the past, I would have been all tense, defensive. I would have felt guilty, shameful, and I would have been resentful after the fact. So as I change how I see myself, I change how I see other people, and I change how I see the world. And when I change how I see other people in the world, I have different experiences. Past performance is not indicative of future results. If you've ever invested, in a mutual fund or a stock or something like that, they always put this disclaimer in the investment contract and materials. Now, what does that mean? Past performance is not indicative of future results. So when you say to somebody, I'll just think about my own experience. It's like who I think I am today in this moment is based on who I was in the past. So again, the example with a police officer or a boss or something like that, I think who I am is based on the experiences that I've had in the past. And when those experiences were negative, I automatically assume that that's who I'm going to be this time. And it often plays out that way. So all of a sudden I have proof. And I could say, well, it's not just this idea that I have in my head. I actually have experiences that prove that relationships don't work out, or that I'm not good enough to get a promotion at work, or, I always do bad at math if I'm a student or whatever. I have these experiences and I say, well, there's the proof. I'm bad at math because look, I've had these experiences. And I'm going to suggest, and I'm not the first person to suggest this, that what if we look at it as the experiences follow the beliefs? What if it's the belief that starts the train rolling? What if it's the expectation? What if it's the idea about ourselves? And then it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy that we all hear about. And then what happens is we have the negative experience, which reinforces that belief. So it becomes kind of a vicious circle. But I'm going to suggest that who we were yesterday does not determine who we are today. And it certainly will not determine who we are tomorrow unless we repeat those same patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, and acting. Our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions determine our experiences in our lives. So if we repeat those same things, then yes, we're going to have the same experience. But when we change that, we have a different experience. Successful people see themselves, this is number 8, as being able to handle situations irrespective of what may have happened in the past. Now, when I was writing this chapter, I thought about that. I just said, what's the difference between the average person and somebody who's really successful? Now, there's a bunch of things that you can, metrics that you could point to, but it occurred to me that to be, and if we define successful as somebody who consistently produces positive results, for somebody to consistently produce positive results, they must not be letting their negative past experiences get in the way. Now, you might say, well, if they're only producing positive experiences, then they don't have any negative experiences. But everybody's had some negative experiences at some point. And one of the things that I learned by watching interviews with successful people is when they start talking about their mistakes and failures, when they talk about how things didn't work out, when they talk about, whether it's in their personal life or in their business, when there was a crisis, when something went horribly wrong, it was how they dealt with that determined whether or not they picked up and continued on with their life and their business. And often those negative experiences, those failures, turned out to be their greatest learning opportunities, their greatest opportunities to make a pivot in their business or in their personal life. So if we're hanging on to the past, and if we're convinced that who we were, the last time we met with that client, or the last time that we took that exam, or the last time that we, performed that task at work, if we're hanging on to the idea that we're the same person every time, it's going to be very difficult to change our experience. So thinking about what successful people do, we have to be able to let go of those negative experiences. Now, I've said this many times. There's no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision if we do two things. Number one, learn from our mistakes. And number two, forgive ourselves for them. Because as we're going to find out in a minute, it's a self-recrimination. It's a self-hatred, the self-loathing that most of us engage in when something doesn't work out. That's the problem. That's what holds us back. That's what causes people to give up on their dreams, on their goals. So we want to learn from our mistakes and then forgive ourselves for them. And then there's no such thing as a mistake. There's no such thing as a failure. It's just another learning opportunity. It's something that will move us closer to where we want to be. Now, limiting thoughts can sometimes manifest as, quote, dealing with reality. I've said this. I've heard other people say this. When there's a challenge, when there's, a pretty tall wall to climb, an obstacle, we kind of default to, well, just the reality of the situation is, I can't do that. Or the reality is I'll never be able to achieve that. And I want to suggest that most of us, in my experience, in my opinion, are a lot more capable and a lot more lovable than we think we are. So this idea that we're just dealing with reality. Now, I give this example in the book. I'll talk about it very briefly here. When I decided I wanted to be a professional photographer, it wasn't enough just for me to sit around and say, I'm a wonderful photographer, I'm a wonderful photographer. That helps, but that's really not enough. I had to learn how to do photography. It's a pretty specific skill set. I had to learn photographic techniques. I had to learn the equipment. I had to learn how to do the editing of the photos and all of that. So the reality was I needed to learn certain things so I could achieve my goal, so I could realize my dream, so I could manifest my vision. So I'm not saying we ignore quote unquote reality, but when that becomes the excuse for not doing something that we really want to do, I'm going to suggest it's really helpful to take a close look at that and question that and say, is that really true? And is there a way for me to, quote unquote, deal with reality and still move towards my goal or my vision? Now, this was really big for me. This was really when I kind of realized this in my own life. Number 10, we're making it all up. Most of the negative stuff that I believe about myself was born out of the mind of a 6-year-old. So as a little kid, I came to certain conclusions about life. I came to certain conclusions about who I was, who other people were, and it was all filtered through the mind of a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or whatever. And, you know, 6-year-olds, 5 years old, 8-year-olds don't have really good cognitive skills, at least when it comes to, you know, interpreting life, interpreting our experiences, understanding the dynamics of relationships. So I came to certain conclusions that had a negative impact on me, and I never questioned those. And the problem is, I'm walking around as an adult, still subconsciously acting out those thoughts and beliefs of a 6-year-old. And in particular, my self-image, who I thought I was, what I was capable of, you know, how lovable I was, how worthy I am as a person, all those things that I learned as a little kid and never knew how to question. I never knew how to make sense of all of that. So I'm going to suggest that for most of us, if we have a negative self-image, if we feel unworthy, if we feel not good enough, I'm going to suggest that it may be, at least in part, based on the conclusions that we came to as a little kid. And it may be time to start questioning those conclusions, to begin to see ourselves differently, to begin to undo that. The problem is, the reason it can be so difficult is that what happens is when those beliefs, when those experiences are negative and we have a negative emotional response, we tend to repress that. We tend to dissociate from that. So it kind of slips into the subconscious. So we're not consciously aware. Like I don't walk around all day saying, not anymore at least, I'm not good enough. Nobody's going to like me. I'm not going to be able to do this. You know, it's going to be painful. It's not going to work out for me. But those are the subconscious thoughts and beliefs that many of us carry from these negative experiences we had as little kids, and we never question that. But in order to question that, we have to be aware of it. So I have to start paying attention to what I'm thinking and feeling in each moment. And it's usually the feelings that I'm aware of first. So the feelings become a clue. Now remember, thoughts lead to feelings. So if I'm feeling negative emotions, there must be some negative thought process, some kind of perceptual process, some kind of a thinking process that precedes those feelings that's negative. So the feelings are the tip-off. And then I want to look at, okay, what am I really thinking about myself and other people in this moment? All right, becoming our own BFF, best friend forever. In my experience, I'm going to talk more about this when we get to chapter 4. Actually, maybe in chapter 2. I was so hard on myself. There was so much self-recrimination. There was so much beating myself up for being less than perfect, for making mistakes, that I didn't want to do anything. It was like I was so mean to myself. I was so hard on myself. And people always used to say to me, you're so hard on yourself. And I would think, well, of course. How else am I going to do better? But what I learned is that's a lie. That's not the truth. Beating ourselves up never makes us better people. Beating myself up never makes me a better person. So a big part of my transformation, a big part of my just ability to be a functional person in the world has come from learning to move from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. And that was really, really important for me in the creative realm when I got into photography and art and fine art and all of that. Because it was so easy for me to judge myself harshly, to criticize myself, to find fault with my work. I mean, this even came up yesterday. So it's so deeply ingrained. The good news is now when it comes up, I'm more aware of it. And I recognize that in that moment, I have a choice. I can either continue to beat myself up, or I can learn to be nicer to myself. There's actually no right or wrong, but I will tell you the quality of my life changes dramatically when I move from this to this. When I move from being hard on myself to being nice to myself, the quality of my life improves. I'm more productive, I get more things done, and I have a better time while I'm doing it. All right, fear of self-recrimination. It's often not their rejection or criticism we're afraid of, it's our own. And then I'll remind you guys, the only opinion of us that really matters is our own opinion. Now, that's great when we have a good opinion of ourselves, but not so great if we have a not so good opinion of ourselves. So that's why it's important to consciously and deliberately choose how I'm going to see myself in each moment, who I'm going to be, who I want to be in each encounter with other people, with whatever. We're going to take our 5-minute break now. So I'm going to play the song. If you're new here, play the song for 5 minutes. The lyrics will be on screen. If you're watching the replay on YouTube, I can't actually play the song. It's called Love My Life by Robbie Williams. We'll be back in 5 minutes and pick up with the review from there. All right, so we are back. Now, I don't know if we're going to cover all this tonight, guys. Still got a lot more, so I'm going to jump right in here. Coming back to chapter 2. Title of chapter 2 is Taking Responsibility. We are each totally responsible for our lives. Now, the word responsibility can be read as respondability, i.e. the ability to respond. And the way we respond to life is via our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Now, this is really important because there's an important relationship between these four things. Our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and our words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in our lives. So if I start with crappy thoughts, I'm going to have crappy feelings. If I have crappy feelings, I'm going to speak crappy words and take crappy actions. And if I speak crappy words and take crappy actions, chances are pretty good that eventually I'll experience crappy outcomes in my life. Now, the opposite is also true. If I start with positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive words and actions, positive outcomes. So it's important to remember that the way we respond, interact with other people, with life itself, is through these four thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we want to begin to consciously pay attention to those thoughts, pay attention to those feelings, pay attention to the words and actions that we express in the world. And what this means is that every thought we think has the potential to manifest as an outcome in our lives. Now, just think about that. Every thought I think has the potential, if I follow it through with feelings, words, and actions, and if I do it consistently, and if I do it with enough energy, it has the potential to manifest as an outcome in my life. So if I'm sitting around thinking about how bad my business is, how bad the economy is, how bad my love life is, how bad my family relationships are, and I ruminate on that all day, and then I begin to feel those feelings, and then I begin to speak words and take actions that reflect that, guess what? Pretty soon, chances are pretty good that those thoughts are going to manifest in my experience, in my reality. So we want to start paying attention to these things. What am I thinking in this moment? What am I feeling? What am I about to say and do? And is that really who I want to be in this situation? Who do you think you are? Who do you want to be in the situation? How do you want to see yourself? Now, this is part of taking responsibility for our lives. So we talked about this last week. Barb alluded to this earlier. Number 6, you make me feel. Most of us, most of the time, live our lives as if our feelings are caused by external conditions, circumstances, situations, and especially other people. And I'm going to say it's my opinion, based on my experience, that that is not true. Nobody makes us feel anything. Now, this is really sticky. I mean, this is, most of us have the experience of something negative happening outside of us, and then we feel negative. We have negative feelings. Somebody does something we don't like, we feel angry. Somebody does something we do like, we feel happy. And we attribute that feeling to what's going on outside of us. And I'm here to say that that's not the way it works. Well, basic premise of my book and of how I've chosen to live my life is that nobody makes me think, feel, say, or do anything. What happens is information from the outside world comes in through my senses, my sight, my hearing, touch, taste, smell. That information enters into the mind. And what happens is what I said earlier. We have this subjective interpretation of that information, that data. That subjective interpretation is what I call the internal filter, this internal filtering process. And the basis of that internal filter is who we think we are, how we see ourselves. So when that information passes through that filter, we then assign a meaning. Remember, we give everything all the meaning it has for us. The world is essentially meaningless until we assign a meaning to it. There is no inherent meaning in anything. So this filtering process results in a meaning that we give the situation, and then we react based on that meaning. We're not actually reacting to the other person or the situation at all. Now, how do I know this is true? Well, it's very simple. I've had this experience, and I bet if you guys think about it hard enough, you can have this, you may have had a similar experience where you have the same people, the same situation, and one time you feel one way, and another time you feel another way. Same people, same situation, different experience. What's the difference? I'm going to suggest that I gave that situation a different meaning the second time. And so I experienced it differently. And the meaning is based on how I see myself. It's very simple. If I have a challenging situation and I know, let's say it's with a client, and I know in the past that this has been a problem for me, it's been a challenge for me, and I've had negative experiences, when I change how I see myself, when I prepare for that meeting, when I know who I want to be, I know what I'm going to say, I decide I'm not going to let what that other person does affect me. Same people, same situation, I have a different experience. The only thing that's changed is the meaning I give the situation based on who I think I am. So it's my position that it's our internal filter that breaks any causal connection between what's happening outside of us and how we think or feel inside. Now, again, this is not to say that other people, we're obviously interacting with people, and the other person's actions or whatever may be the stimulus for us to choose. But ultimately, we choose how we feel. We choose what we think, feel, say, and do in each situation. They become, the impetus for us to make that decision, to make that choice, but we're choosing. Now, the problem is most people say, well, I didn't choose to feel upset. I didn't choose to feel angry. And I'll say, you didn't consciously choose that. We're not consciously making those choices and decisions, but the fact that we're not doing it consciously doesn't mean we're not doing it. And if I'm reacting from my habitual conditioned response to that person in that situation, I'm still choosing. It's just a habitual conditioned response. The whole point of all of this work is to bring all this to our conscious awareness. So in each moment when we're challenged, we remember, oh, I have a choice here. I get to decide. I get to decide if I'm going to feel hurt or defensive or angry or sad or rejected. I get to choose that. They don't make me feel hurt. They don't make me feel defensive. And as I change how I see myself, I change how I'm going to react, how I'm going to respond in that situation. So no one makes us feel anything. Our internal filtering process breaks any causal connection. And what we talked about, this was the first few weeks, it's in the book. We can consciously change who we think we are, how we see ourselves. The 5 tools that I use that I've shared with you guys: positive affirmations, a vision statement or multiple vision statements, guided meditations or visualizations, a vision board, and mind movies. Now, there's different, there's overlap between these 5 things. Some people use one more than the other. There's no right or wrong with any of that. I'm not going to I don't have time to get into the details of any of that. But the first, if you go watch some of it's probably the workshops we did last August, about a year ago. In a few of those, I talked about specifically, I took the time, I broke it down. I showed you my vision board. I read you my vision statement. I have a vision statement in the back of the book. My vision statement, you can read it there. If you want an example. I showed you my mind movie. I have a mind movie on my phone. So whenever I want that reminder, and I use positive affirmations, the affirmation meditations that I share with you guys, I have 5 of them that I did for myself in different covering different areas of my life. I was just listening to one this afternoon. So we can consciously and deliberately change who we think we are, how we see ourselves. So when we're confronted with that person who usually triggers us, so when we're challenged by that situation, which used to cause us, which we used to have a meltdown over, we can make a different choice in the moment. And when we make a different choice in the moment, we have a different experience. Does it take work? Yeah, it takes work, but think of all the work that we put into the old way of being. Think of how many times I repeated to myself all those negative affirmations, all those negative thoughts and beliefs. So, if it takes a little effort to change that, to reprogram, we talk a lot about reprogramming. That's the price of having a new life. If you want a different life, it's going to take some work. So there's some dictionary definitions of the word responsibility. I'll hide myself so you can see it. Responsibility, the opportunity or ability to make decisions, the state or fact of being accountable for something, being the primary cause of something. If I'm responsible for something, I'm the primary cause of that. And I just got through saying I'm the primary cause of my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Really important. Now, what I talk about when I discuss responsibility, I like the 3 A's: awareness, accountability, and action. Again, I don't have a lot of time to go into this. This is in chapter 2. Awareness, we want to be aware in the moment of the effect of our behavior on ourselves and others. We want to be accountable if we've done something that's caused harm to another person or to ourselves. And then we want to take action to make things right. We talked about the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is what I talked about a minute ago, that habitual, conditioned way of reacting when somebody comes into our field of vision or into our lives in a situation. It's the reacting versus responding. When we respond, we bring some conscious intention to the moment, some conscious awareness. We have a plan. We're aware of what we want to achieve in that situation. So we're responding versus reacting, which is where we're not thinking. It's that old program that just automatically takes over. So, and responding usually requires some kind of a pause, just, stopping the train, even if it's just for a moment. And that's how we have a different experience in the moment. Talk is cheap. So responsibility means getting into action. It's one thing to say that I want to be personal development writer and teacher. It's another thing to write the book. It's another thing to record the audio book. It's another thing to edit all of that. It's another thing to then actually submit it for publication. It's not enough to say that we want certain things in our lives. We have to take the action to create that. And I'm suggesting an action partner, somebody you speak to on a regular basis, an accountability partner, somebody who supports you, somebody who you can support in achieving your goals. I also have a mastermind group that I use. Get support from those people. They support me. So those are 2 things that we can do to help us get into action, to achieve the things that we want to achieve. Now, the most important thing I can say about responsibility is number 13. Responsibility is not the same as blame. I know for me in my own life, for most of my life, I was reticent to take responsibility for things, especially if it had a negative outcome, if it was something that harmed another person, caused loss, injury, damage, anything like that. I thought that if I took responsibility, it was just more proof that I was a bad person. And I would feel shame and I would feel guilty and I would, all that negative stuff. So if that's the way I'm going to feel when I make a mistake, I'm never going to want to admit that I made a mistake. So the connection in my mind is that responsibility is liability. It means I'm bad. It means I'm unworthy. It means I'm not good enough. So I'm here to say responsibility is not the same as blame, and guilt is just another word for self-hatred. We don't want to feel guilty. We want to be aware of when we've done something harmful to ourselves or others. We want to be accountable and we want to take action to make it right. I recognize now that admitting when I've done something wrong, when I've done something harmful, it's an act of self-love. When I take responsibility for that, because in the past, I wouldn't take responsibility, but I would feel the guilt and I would feel bad about myself and I would feel shameful. And if it involved another person, I could never interact. I could never have true intimacy with that other person because I felt bad about what I had done to them or not done or whatever. So by admitting, by telling the truth, by taking responsibility, it's an act of self-love because it frees me from that shame. It frees me from the self-hatred, the guilt. All right, let's move on to chapter 3. Chapter 3, true power and true happiness. I define true power as the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Most of my life, I thought power was having power over other people, getting other people to do what I wanted them to do. I realize now that true power is having power over myself, being able to consciously and deliberately choose what I'm going to think, feel, say, and do in each moment. That's true power. What I used to call power is really coercion, manipulation, deception, force. That's not real power. So recognizing that true power is the ability to consciously choose and or change my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, then what I come to is true power is having power over ourselves. And what this means is, number one, no one but us can choose or change what we think, feel, say, or do. Next, we can't choose or change anyone else's thoughts, feelings, words, or actions. And number 5 on this list, our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are the only 4 things we need power over to create the life that we want. Now, what this means is essentially I'm powerless over other people, and other people are powerless over me. External events, circumstances, conditions are powerless over me. Now, I didn't know that, and most of my life, my feelings were dictated by what I thought was going on around me. And if I thought the situation was pleasing, I felt good, and if I thought the situation was not pleasing, I felt bad. But what I want to emphasize here is that I am powerless over other people, meaning I don't cause what they think, feel, say, or do. I don't have that kind of power. So if somebody's upset, most of my life, if I thought somebody was upset, I thought it was my fault. That's like codependency 101. Now, I may have a responsibility to that person. My behavior may have been inappropriate, and I can be accountable for that. But I'm not responsible for how they feel. Because I could do the same thing to 2 different people, and one person would be upset, and the other person wouldn't be. Well, I thought I caused people to feel the way they feel. How come they're not feeling the same? I don't make anybody feel anything, good or bad. The flip side is other people don't make me feel anything, good or bad. They don't have that kind of power over me unless I give them that power, unless I choose to make them responsible for how I feel, which I love to do because then I can blame them when I don't like what they're doing. True power means if we're doing it, we're choosing it. That's part of the responsibility part. If I'm doing it, I'm choosing it. Nobody makes me, just like nobody makes me think or feel anything, nobody makes me say or do anything either. If I'm doing it, I'm choosing it. Now, we talked about the difference between reactors and creators. Notice that it's the same word. Reactor and creator, they're the same word, but when we see correctly, when you move that C, we move from the former to the latter, and we have the ability to consciously create our lives. So I can either be reactive or I can be creative. But if I'm going to be creative, I got to take responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. If I don't take responsibility, then I'm reactive. I'm a reactor. And I become like a billiard ball, reacting to what everybody else is doing, never in charge of my own feelings, never in charge of my own life, always waiting for the next conflict or the next problem or the next, positive interaction with somebody to decide how I feel. True power is when I can feel joyful, I can feel safe, I can feel content, and the rest of the world is going crazy. That's true power. There's Man's Search for Meaning, the book that was written by, Jenna, you know his name?
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl, right. Man's Search for Meaning. This guy was in a concentration camp, World War II. And he recognized that he had a choice. But he apparently was able to choose. Perhaps he wasn't, it wasn't a joyful, happy kind of thing, but he was not, he didn't give his power away. He didn't give up his sense of self based on what was going on around him. So my only point is, it is possible to do that. All right, so we want to move from being reactors to creators. Anytime we're blaming other people, being a victim, reacting rather than responding, or acting out of fear or other negative emotions, we're giving our power away. We don't want to give our power away. When we give our power away, that means we're letting somebody else decide for us how we feel. We're letting somebody else decide for us what we should think, feel, say, and do. And most of the time, the person that we're letting decide that for us, they can't even take care of themselves. How are they possibly going to help us for what we should think, feel, say, and do? Now, again, we're not, it's not that we don't take advice from other people. It's not that we don't support other people, allow other people to support us. But if I'm blaming somebody, if I'm feeling like a victim, if I'm acting out of fear, anger, resentment, I'm giving my power away. I'm basically saying, situation, you decide for me how I should feel based on my past experiences, rather than saying, who do I want to be in this moment? Remember, the most important question we can ask is, who do you think you are? The second most important question is, who do you want to be? Until you know who you want to be, you can't be that. I can't be that. And I'm going to let everybody else determine that for me. Now, here's the bad news. We actually are already creating our lives the way we want them to be. Since we're all living in accordance with our predominant thoughts and beliefs, we get and have as much as we think we deserve from life. So I often say, if you want to know who you think you are, look at your life. Look at what you got in your life or don't have in your life. It's all a reflection of who we think we are, what we deserve, what we're capable of. Now, it could be good news. Hopefully it's good news. Either way, we don't want to make ourselves wrong or beat ourselves up, but it is really good feedback. It's a good way to notice. Say, wow, what kind of job do I have? What kind of house do I live in? How much money do I make? Whatever. Not to say that those are the determining factors, but they reflect back to us who we think we are. Particularly our relationships. If we have a lot of supportive, loving people in our lives, it's probably because we see ourselves as somebody who deserves that. And I don't mean like in an entitled way. Deserve can be a sticky word. I mean it in a positive way. It's not like entitled. It's not a negative thing. I'm just saying, it's okay for us to have people in our lives that support us, that love us. I just launched, this week on Monday, I launched the second edition on Amazon, and I reached out to a lot of people, and I got a really positive, it was wonderful to see how much support I got. And I felt so grateful, and I realized, wow, probably even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, I would not have been able to do that because I didn't see myself as somebody who deserves support like that. I didn't see myself as valuable or worthy enough for people to want to help, to want to be involved in my achievements and all of that. Thanks, Didi. So yeah, if you want to know, how you see yourself, look at your life. Don't beat yourself up for it, but notice and say, wow, okay, so I got some work to do. And you can celebrate. If you like what you have in your life, celebrate. It's a positive thing. So what was really interesting for me was when I realized the relationship between power and responsibility. They're actually the same thing. You can't have one without the other. So as long as it's somebody else's fault that I feel the way I feel, then you know what? I can't change how I feel until they change. And if I'm sitting around waiting for them to change, if I'm sitting around waiting for somebody else to change before I can feel happy or content or safe or worthwhile, I may be in for a very long wait. I'm giving up my power to choose for myself how I feel about myself, about other people. So until I take responsibility for all of it, I can't change any of it. Now, this is good news because responsibility is not the same as blame. Taking responsibility for my living situation is not the same as blaming myself for it if I don't like it. And by taking responsibility, I can change it. Breaking old habits and making new choices often requires courage. Now, we're going to talk more about this in chapter 4, but this is because change is scary. We talked about the ego. The ego is our sense of identity in the world. And sometimes, often, for some of us, that identity is negative. I'm an angry person. I'm unlovable. I'm an unlovable person. I'm unworthy. I don't have what it takes. They're not going to like me. When we try to change that identity, it's threatening to the ego. And so it becomes, it's threatening. It can almost be frightening. It can be scary to change because I may not like who I think I am, but at least I know who that person is. So again, I'll give you the example of, embarking on this career as a writer and as an author and speaker. I did a live television interview this week, and it challenges my whole idea of who I am, and so to step into that, it was frightening. It was scary. It's letting go of the old Peter who, didn't have anything to say on live television, who didn't have anything worthwhile to share with people, who was a fraud. Actually, the person who interviewed me, she asked me about the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is when we feel like a fraud. That's how I lived most of my life, feeling like a fraud. So when I change that idea about myself, it's uncomfortable, it's scary. So it can require courage to change that. Number 12, true happiness. So happiness is not a feeling. Happiness is not a feeling. Joy is a feeling. Fun is a feeling. Affection is a feeling. I say happiness is a decision. It's a choice. It's a decision to experience life in a certain way. And we make it irrespective of what's going on around us. But here's the price of choosing happiness. We have to deliberately choose thoughts, feelings, words, and actions that are consistent with it. Now, if I have an identity that says I'm a depressed person, I have to give up that identity if I want to experience happiness. I have to let go of all the negative thoughts. I have to let go of the anger, the resentment, the defensiveness, the self-doubt, the self-pity, because those are not conducive to happiness. Our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions. If I'm thinking negative thoughts, I am not going to feel happy. So I have to choose that. I have to decide that that's what I want. And then I have to think thoughts, feel feelings, speak words, and take actions consistent with that. Number 13, I'm not going to go into that other than to say that we often mistake satisfaction, relief, physical pleasure, and or fun with family or friends for happiness. Yes, we can feel joy. There's nothing wrong with satisfaction. There's nothing wrong with relief. There's nothing wrong with physical pleasure. There's nothing wrong with having fun. But the point is, those things are often fleeting. They don't last. And they're based on something happening outside of us. True happiness is wanting what you get. Dale Carnegie said that. So when Viktor Frankl was in that concentration camp, he had to make a decision to at least be in a place of acceptance. True happiness is an ongoing internal decision to feel joy no matter what. It means being happy for any reason or for no reason at all. True happiness is not fleeting. It's there whenever we want it. It's not based on something outside of us happening or not happening. Now, I shared this when we talked about chapter 3. you know, there have been times in my life when I valued unhappiness more than happiness. And that was because there was a payoff to being unhappy. And I shared with you guys that in at least one relationship, I could never be happy because I wanted that person to know how much they hurt me. And so I sacrificed my own happiness to hurt somebody else, to get back at somebody else. So the payoff to being unhappy was that I was getting even with somebody. So I sacrificed my own happiness to punish somebody else. That's the level of my insanity. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm that unique in that regard. I think people do this a lot. So I'm suggesting that if we're experiencing unhappiness, it might be because there's a payoff. We're valuing the negative experience for some reason. Number 17, all expressions of true power and true happiness are arbitrary vis-a-vis the external world. This means the choice to be happy is not dependent on what's going on out there. It's an internal decision to feel joy no matter what's going on out there. That makes it arbitrary vis-a-vis the external world, but it's not at all arbitrary in terms of my internal world. It's a reflection of who I want to be in that situation. So in that sense, it's not arbitrary at all. It's a decision of, I'm creating who I want to be. So I'm making the choice, I'm making the decision irrespective of what's going on around me. I'm not giving my power away. I'm not blaming other people for how I feel. I can still take care of myself. I can still set boundaries. I can still eliminate people from my life. I can still hold other people accountable. But I can do all of that from love. I can do all of that from a place of serenity and peace. I don't have to be a raging victim. I don't have to take things personally. I don't have to feel defensive or angry to take care of myself. I can separate with love rather than anger. I can set boundaries with serenity and peace rather than anger and defensiveness. That's it for today. You guys want to say anything? Anybody want to comment?
Okay, so here's Dee Dee. I want to say, here's what I want to say. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before this training, when I thought I was going to be afraid in the presence of another person, like my whole defense strategy showed up, which was never good, always horrific for me. And now I get to be different, and I'm practicing, and there's an opportunity coming up, I can tell, in the next 3 months with a really somebody who I asked to do me a favor to build a bridge between my family as it relates to losing my dad, and they were unsuccessful, and I've been mad for a year, and I get to meet them in a different situation, and I get to be like not mad about it. I get to be just the fabulous me that I want to be. And it's really thanks to you, because I now know that I get to choose, and I will. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dee Dee. You're doing great. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you, Dr. Jenna. I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on the topics?
Yes, it was probably great to hear it again. Second time is even better. So it was nice to review it.
Good.
Thank you.
And, you know, all the workshops are online right now. They're not going to be there forever, but if you guys want to go back and review the last year, they're all there. All right, anybody else? I'm going to play the song one more time, 3.5 minutes. We'll come back and do our final goodbyes. All right, guys, so we are going to be here next week and the week after. Next week, we're going to do chapter 4 and 5. The later chapters are actually longer than the first 3 chapters, so I'm going to attempt 2 chapters next week, and then the final 2 chapters the week after. So hopefully you guys can make it. If not, I'll record it. And I'm going to just ask, if you haven't already gotten your copy of the second edition, that would help out on first week sales on Amazon are really important. So if you're so inclined, please do that. Tell your friends about it. And if you've already gotten your books, I know some of you have. Thank you so much. I totally appreciate that. And I think that's it. Anybody want to say anything?
And submit a review.
Oh, yeah, the review. 5-star review.
Of course. 10, 20.
There you go. Great.
I get my back tomorrow.
And I just want to say I'm so excited to have gotten my Be Bigger Than You Think You Are second edition today. And
They
I'm
arrived.
just where I want to be. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Cynthia.
Congratulations, Peter. I'm choosing happiness in my life and miracles for my life. And I'm so glad to be on the road, on the path with you and everybody here and those that are joining us soon.
So appreciate you guys. Thank you. All right, guys. So I will see you next week. Remember, be bigger than you think you are today and every day. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Woohoo! Go you.
You too. Good night, Peter.
Good night.
Good night, guys.